Hello everyone, my name is Abigail Smith and this is my week 6 presentation. Wanted to share with you guys just so you can get a better understanding of, what's going on. So first, I would like to share that because of these two anthropologists, we can understand more about voodoo rituals. These two anthropologists, also known as the ancestors, Arnold van Gennep and Victor Turner. At the beginning of this course, I was very curious of voodoo rituals and, just silly me. When I hear voodoo rituals, I picture the Disney movie Princess and the Frog, based in Louisiana, where spirit possession is more of spells and dark magic. Now I know it is much more than that. It is a religion of action, not just belief and embodiment, enjoyment, and just this whole circle of the community. Now, in 1960, the University of Chicago published a translation of Rites de Passage by Arnold van Gennep, written in 1909, where he identified this process as separation, liminal, and reincorporation. Van Gennep uses life experiences like puberty, childbirth, and marriage to describe how each of these phases are integrated into our lives and how we can go through these phases as well. In Victor Turner, he appears in 1969, where he writes his book, The Ritual Process, Structure and Anti-Structure, where he uses Van Gennep's work to build his own work and adds onto it and to create his own. On page 95 of that book, he defines liminality as liminal entities are neither here nor there. They are betwixt and between, the positions assigned and arrayed by law, custom, convention, and ceremonial. Turner also defines communitas, or community, and the second model of human interrelatedness on page 96 of that same book, saying of society as an unstructured or rudimentary structure and relatively undifferentiated community or even communion of equals, individuals who submit together to the general authority of the ritual elders. Sorry, that is a mouthful to say. To me, liminality means something in the midst of change, in the process of change, kind of like this in-between phase, where they have not fully converted to that change. My interpretation of communitas is the togetherness of the community regardless of hierarchy, so people can feel a real deep sense of belonging and, again, that community. Now, with these findings, we are going to pull from Joseph M. Murphy's book, Working the Spirit, and how it's connected to the many voodoo rituals he describes, connected to the 3 phases: separation, liminal, and reincorporation. The ceremony I have chosen to digest with is the lave-tete. Lave-tete is defined by Murphy as the initiation of the washed head, and part of this initiation ceremony is called the coucher, which means to be laid on the floor. These two ceremonies help build connaissance, something like that, which is defined as spiritual insight in the glossary of Murphy's book. Murphy writes about Catherine Dunham's experiences going through all these ceremonies. So Dunham starts in society her head unwashed, her eyes unopened, and she answers a call from the spirit or the Elwa. And she says on page 19, turn over there. There we go. And I thought this was really interesting. Dunham doesn't say what motivated her to participate other than to explain that an initiate does not choose to join a voodoo community, but responds to a call from the Ewa. So she wasn't planning on joining the community. She wasn't just doing it out of curiosity. She had a call from the spirit where it could appear in a dream, or someone already involved in the community tells her like, hey, you need to do this. And so she doesn't just do it to do it, you know what I mean? She just, she was called. Continuing on page 20 of the book, she explains she needed special items to obtain before going to the Onfo, which means temple. So she says she needed special kinds of clothes, food, liquors, lotions, eggs, herbs, roots, powders, so on and so forth. And she needed all these items before she can go into isolation in the Devjo, which is a sanctuary room in the Onfo, and describes what she encountered on page 21. She describes the smells of dry blood, fresh blood, the incense, the burning of charcoal, and she also describes how she's departing from herself and entering into the spirit. So this is the separation phase. During the flooring of the ceremony, Dunham is instructed to take breaks, but when she takes these breaks, she needs to complete specific salutations of the Onfo. These salutations include on page 22, and I really liked this. She writes, then the turn to all four directions of the compass. Hand gripped tightly in hand, with sacred words spoken in each direction. The approach to the altar, the recognition of each grade of protocol by obedience and word. What I really liked about that is that this book is rather difficult to understand, but that is something I do understand, and I can visualize it in my head. And even though I haven't gone through this or experienced this, I can have a bigger understanding of what she needs to do in order to complete the ceremony. Okay, let's see, where was I? There we go. Then this is leading Dunham into limitality, where one head is divided into two elements or angels. One is T Bonje, which means little good angel or the conscious person. The other one is Go, something like that. Bonje, which is big good angel, or the source of memories and intelligence. The Guo Bonje is prepared to be removed to make space for the spirit by a poultice placed on their head, containing specific ingredients for each Elwa to be manifested, and for it to be strong enough to be placed into the potet, which is a container for human spirits. And all of that is described on page 23 and 24 of the book. Now, we're going to go and talk about Maya Duran, also in Murphy's book, as she describes her liminal phase on page 35, saying, she talks about how she can feel her white skirt dancing with the rhythms of the drums, and she feels radiance and love. She says Shirley is lovelier than anything she's ever seen. And then she goes and turns to her neighbor to say, look, see how lovely it is. And she realizes that she is not within herself. She's no longer watching herself. So her mind is separated from her body, and she is in that in-between phase, that liminal phase, that between here nor there. She's not there and she's not here. That in-between phase. Moving on to the last phase, reincorporation is described in the ceremony of the burning of pots, which is the Bolazen, which is 3 pots are placed on a flame, and the initiates leave the onfo under white sheets. The initiates stand over the pots to breathe in fire and dance over the flames. Once the pots, and I thought this was interesting, once the pots have broken, the initiates start to dance in the flames. So at first they're dancing over the flames, and now they're dancing in the flames once the pots have broken. All that is described on page 26. The breaking of pots signified the returning to society with their new selves with a spiritual status. With all that being said, there is so much more to Haitian voodoo and rituals than I ever knew. The community has overcome so much by making it through the revolution and not just mixing in with the Catholic Church, but using that as a survival skill, and to save their African identity and to save that community. They had to integrate the Catholic Church in order to save where they come from and all that. Now I know to lessen my assumptions of the community and think of them more than Princess and the Frog. So that is my presentation. Also, I just wanted to share some tips and what really helped me through this presentation, because it was a lot and the book is rather difficult to read just because there's so much information coming at once, and also just so many words I really don't understand. I did have to read and reread and read and reread 15-20 times, but if there was a word I didn't understand, I always turned to the glossary in the back of the book, and it had all of the definitions of the words and what he meant by it. And it also has where the his references. And then I would go back and read it again. So first initial read, I wouldn't go back and look at the glossary. I kind of just read it to get that basic outline of what he's talking about. And then the second time I would read it, and that's when I would kind of like flip back and forth, and that's when I could finally connect the dots of okay, the Onfo is the temple, and then they go to the Onfo, but then they go into the Devjo which is the sanctuary room for this ceremony, but this ceremony and that ceremony builds this and does that. It is a lot to take in, but that is something I have done to help me with this process and presentation. Helped me understand and learn so much more in this class. So yeah, that is my presentation. I hope that helps, and thank you for watching.